Hello and welcome to Really Cool People, a podcast produced by Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Leininger. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people. And the hope is that as you and I listen, we'll be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. In a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said, "There are no ordinary people. You and I have never talked to a mere mortal." It's my joy over the next few moments to introduce you to somebody who may seem somewhat ordinary, especially to themselves, and yet they are a really cool person. Today, we're going to meet Kim Hammons, and she's going to talk about her life, and some of the things that she's going to share will be hard to hear. But then she's going to talk about how God met her and how she's been walking with God. And in the words, she's not going to say these words, but in the words of some Benedictines, Kim has really been a project of God all along. And she's going to share her faith in a really some deep and profound ways. So I invite you to lean in with me and let's listen to Kim Hammons. Today we're happy to have in studio Kim Hammons. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
And let's start with your story.
Where to begin? I really don't know where to begin. You were talking a little earlier about your genealogy, but it made me think I have an eclectic background in my ancestors, and one of them is, I have no proof, but this is the lore that we have, that we, on my mother's side of the family, that Hans Christian Andersen is related to us. But then on my dad's side of the family, Belle Starr is related to us. So we actually had a check of her estate when she passed away that our family received of the total. I think it was like $1.39 or something that my dad had framed and kept it up on the wall until our house burned down. But we don't have it that any longer, so it would be hard to verify that. But those were some eclectic things that I thought of about my family. I did come from a very large family, had 5 brothers and sisters. My mom and dad were both raised Catholic. My dad's family was from the Belgium area. We had a unique last name, Flum, which when spelled, a lot of people did not know how to pronounce it. And I would challenge you to ask if you could spell it and see how well you...
F-L-U-G-H-M.
No. No, not even close.
How do you spell Flum?
P-F-L-U-M-M.
Wow.
Yes, a little different. And of course, you could glean from that there was a lot of mocking that went along with my fling, flang, flume, flum was one of the, and it's funny that I still remember that. I guess I won't ever forget that. But so that was my dad's side. My mom's side is Anderson, and S-E-N, not S-O-N, which is one of the factors that says that maybe that's why we were related to Hans Christian Andersen. Like I said, I had 5 brothers and sisters. I was considered myself the middle child, but with 6, you really don't have a middle. My sister, who's just 12 months older than me, is consider herself the middle. So we decided she's the middle older and I'm the middle younger. Because, in 6, you don't really have a middle.
You have to arm wrestle or thumb wrestle for who's the middle?
No, we did not. I don't know how we just came up with that. But believe it or not, I was a very introverted, very shy young lady, child, I should say. Lived in my own little world felt very not a part of my family. In fact, at one time in my young life, I asked my mother to see the adoption papers. And her response wasn't quite like that. She got very mad. But I felt so different. I just felt very, very different. I felt like I didn't act like them and look like them. And it was really hard to find my place in there. And so it was easier to be quiet and live inside than to be and I had it, believe it or not, although I had a younger sister who was very vivacious, and everyone always thought she was the older one. She was very dominant in her personality, and so it was just easier to let her to be that dominant personality.
So a couple of different questions right there.
Okay.
So what were some of the things, exterior things, that made you think I don't fit here? I mean, what were some of those things you just noticed. I imagine you've. And then the second thing is, when you said you lived on the inside, did you create worlds? What'd you do there?
Well, I was a Tom girl. I lived out the doors a lot. I would be, the minute the sun was up till the sundown, I would be outside. We were very fortunate that we lived on acreage that had forest, or not forest, but woods.
Yeah.
And I spent many a time in the woods. One of my favorite things to do was to build forts. I would carve out the ground and find tree limbs and find areas inside there that had open areas. And so I would create rooms with the limbs and dig stairs to go up and different levels of the thing, and just play and dig. And then I was also very fortunate that some of our neighbors had horses, so we got to go horse riding a lot in that. I just was an outdoor, so I just played in that, in my imaginary world, and these different homes and stuff that I created. So.
Wow. You still do that?
I don't go out to the woods and dig in the dirt, but I do dig in the dirt by gardening. I guess there's that. I do like reading, especially fiction, where it takes you to different worlds. So that's kind of maybe my alternate way of doing that is through my reading.
I was just imagining, like, when you described that, like the Lord of the Rings and all that. Are you a big Tolkien fan?
Yes. Yeah.
I
read that, and I want to say freshman year, somewhere around there, I read it, and read The Hobbit first, loved it, and then read The Lord of the Rings, read the trilogy, and I read it every year. But it led to an interesting question by reading that. If this author could create a language, could create a world, could create this beautiful landscape, why would not the Bible be in the same? Would the author of the Bible not have done the same thing? And it's not just a work of fiction. And I asked that question a lot of times in my youth, and I couldn't find anybody to ever answer that in a way that would dispute that. So that was part of my spiritual journey too. In that, I probably how do I want to say this? Well, I believed in God. Going to Catholic school, parochial school, I don't want to say you got God shoved down your throat, but you pretty much got, an introduction to who God is and that. But then again, you read The Lord of the Rings, and that it was more comfortable believing in that than it was in believing in God. For me.
So you went to Catholic school?
Yes.
In whereabouts?
In Shawnee Mission.
Okay.
That's where we grew up. My dad's family, his mom and dad immigrated there. They were actually one of the founders of Shawnee Mission area. In fact, there's a Flum Road, named after my great grandfather. There are a lot of Flums up there. They were one of the founding families there. So, so I went to St. Joseph. I went to a different kindergarten because they did not have kindergarten. I went to a public kindergarten, and then I went to St. Joseph up to 5th grade, and then 6th grade was my first time into public school.
So then, if you're in the middle, obviously you go through high school and stuff like that. Do you have memories there that are good, sweet memories? Well, I mean, prior to us going live, you talked about you had a time when you were in acting class and you got to connect with Brian, who's now your husband. So you want to retell that story?
Retell that. Yeah. That was one of the good things. I think it was our sophomore year in high school. We both took the same class, and I can't remember, it was probably drama, something like that, because we did do acting and speaking and that sort of thing. And we were paired up to do a skit together, and we chose to do the Diary of Anne Frank as our skit. And as we read through it, we found the part where Peter and Ann talked about, I don't even remember what they talked about. They talked, but they had a nice dialogue going, which was good for, two people. But it also had a kissing scene where he kind of pecks her on her cheek. And we practiced that a lot, I guess we should say. And later, when we got together, which was 4 years after high school, again, we both reminisced about that, and we asked each other, because at that time I was dating somebody and he was dating somebody. And so I asked him, did you think about maybe breaking up and dating? And he asked me the same thing. We both said we thought about it, but decided no, it wasn't worth it. So, but it is kind of neat ironic that we got together and did marry.
Yeah, that is. Was that Shawnee Mission too?
No, that's by that time, I moved to Stockton. I lived in Shawnee until 7th grade.
Okay.
And then the middle of 8th grade, I moved to Stockton. Yeah.
What caused the move? What was the impetus behind that?
Oh, there were many things. I found out later the biggest reason is my older brother had been getting into a lot of trouble. And so Dad wanted us to move away. And he was also a builder. He built a lot of homes. And he got very frustrated. He became very frustrated with all the zoning laws that were hampering what he liked to do in his creativity. So evidently he had driven through Stockton on his way to Table Rock several times. And so he knew about that and went, and his original goal was to purchase, he found 80 acres. And he was just going to retire there. And I'm not exactly sure what he planned. But when they surveyed it, they found some county roads that went into the lake. By that time, Stockton Lake had already been filled and was about ready to have a dedication. That was about 1971 is when the dam was dedicated. And the Corps, when they created the lake, they bought up about 500 acres of the shoreline, so nobody could ever really build on Stockton Lake. And then they strategically placed their marinas so that no one could have private boat docks. You had to be, I think it was 10 to 12 miles by land in between these strategically placed marinas. And then if you were within that parameter, you could build a boat dock. But they evidently plotted that out really well, so there wasn't any. But when Dad found this acreage and he found these county roads, he fell into that parameter and was able to put in private boat docks. One of the only places, I think, on Stockton Lake that has that. And he got this wild hair to build not a marina, but he built a hotel with a restaurant and a gas station, and he ended up putting a 9-hole golf course in Wellhead subdivision. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So he was a builder.
Yes, he was a builder.
Yeah. And so what was it like to go from Shawnee to Stockton?
For me, it was a saving grace. I really felt like I had a horrible incident in the 6th grade that really added to my introvertness. Is that a word? Introvertness. During my 6th grade, my first year in public school, 2 things happened actually. One was, it was the first time we had music, because Catholics, they don't have, well, they have music, but it's not, they approach it a little different. So I went to music class and enjoyed singing, enjoyed it, but afterwards the music teacher told me not to come back. Yeah. So I love telling that in choir. And yet I'm singing in choir. Is there some irony in there? And I don't know that, but it was really hard. But the worst thing was I had developed about 5 girls. There was about 6 of us that we had become friends and interacted a lot and did a lot of things together. And our playground, or our grounds that we were at this public school was a big farm, not farmland, but an open acreage. And in the middle of the open acreage was a ditch that ran through it. But anyway, these girls came up to me during our recess, and they formed a semicircle in front of me. And I thought, oh, I'm so excited. They're probably going to ask me to go to a sleepover or something. And I was just very excited to hear what they were to say. And one of the lead girls said, "We all took a vote today and decided we hate you."
Oh my.
I know. It was probably the second most traumatic thing that happened to me, and devastated beyond belief. And so I went into that ravine and I hid out there. And finally the teacher came and got me. I don't know how long I was out there, but it just set the tone for me, just added to all the previous things that in my childhood that were building up to add to my insecurity and feeling of worthiness. That just kind of was the topper. So to me, I looked at it as far as a new break. The irony of that was I decided to move down with my dad early. And most of the children were going to finish out the school year. I said, I'll move down after Christmas. And I'll never forget, before break, at the last day of school that I had at junior high, I was sitting in a classroom, it was a science classroom, and explaining that I won't be back. And I was real excited about where I was going. And another classmate said, "I'm leaving too. Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Stockton." She said, "Oh, I'm going to Stockton too." And I said, we found out she was moving down sooner than I was. So I just did whatever, what I thought was, I said, "Why don't you go down there and, you can kind of open things up and, I'll just come down the hills of you and we'll already have a friendship going," and so on and so on. That didn't quite happen. I found out about 3 years later, she went down and told everybody that I dealt with drugs and I was free with my ways with boys, and said a lot of other things. And so I was not very well accepted when I first got
in
there.
6th grade?
Yeah. Well, it was 8th grade.
8th grade. Wow.
Yeah. So all those, that and some things that happened way early in my life that added to that feeling that I mentioned earlier about going into myself and feeling very insecure and very unworthy.
And so Stockton was a reprieve.
I was hoping it would be. And initially it was, but I did think it was interesting at first why very few of the girls seemed to want to have anything to do with me, but all the guys did. I found out later. I said all the guys just had Russian hands and Roman fingers, but and you might want to edit that out.
Oh my stairs! No, we're keeping it.
So
that's a good line.
But the good thing of that, men and young boys, young men and young men, they don't hold grudges. Once you tell them and they realize what's not true, they treat you with all fairness. And so I did. I had more guy friends all through school than I did girls, because I hate to say this about my sex, but we hold grudges royally. I mean, we are very bad about holding grudges and not being very friendly to our other women. So that was my lesson learned. So it's hard for me to have a girlfriend. I feel.
Has that changed since then?
I wish I could say, because another incident similar to that happened, and I had a really good friend that I went to high school with, met up with her later. She and her husband married about the same time we did. And we had many, many years of friendships, and I could tell her anything and share with her, cry on her shoulder and such. Fast forward, she ended up divorcing her husband. And when she told me, I was shocked, because never once in our relationship had she ever shared that she and her husband had any kind of problems. And she started seeing someone, and then that was the end of our friendship. Just nothing, So it was hard for me to grasp why. And then I started doubting, did she just tolerate me and made fun at me when I shared all the things with her? It was just really hard. So I have a hard time making friends with women, I guess.
Well, let's pivot. Let's go back to like post high school. What did you do then?
Well, let's see. I wanted to go to college, but none of my parents went to college. Well, my mom went for a little bit. My dad went to drawing school to be is it an architect? Is that right? Anyway, to draw plans for houses. And so college was not mentioned a lot. And that. But I did talk to a counselor, and I put my money in to go, but I had no really anybody to help guide me. So I never did go to college, but I did have it. We did have a doctor who delivered all of us kids, and he was a good friend of my mom and dad's because of that. And he shared with my dad that there was a school in Kansas City called Kansas City College of Medical and Dental Assistants, and said that would be a good place to go. And so I did. I enrolled into the medical assistant program and really enjoyed it. Really, I learned how to do CBCs. I learned how to draw blood. I learned how to do X-rays, excuse me. I learned how to read urine analysis. I learned how to read a differential when I took the blood and put it on there, put it on the microscope and see your red blood counts and white blood cells and all that. And which at that time, we're talking 40 years ago, probably, doctor's office did all that. So this equipped me to be able to work in a doctor's office who had their own X-ray machine. You could do a quick urinalysis for them. You could do a quick RBC, which is a red blood count for them, and do all those things because they didn't farm that out at that time. They needed that done. And so they were equipping us to be that kind of a physician assistant at that. I did not end up working with the doctor, but I did go. I moved back to Stockton after I graduated and applied to some of the doctors around there. But since I wasn't an RN, they wouldn't even look at me. So I applied at the hospital and put down all the things that I had learned. And the lady who was ahead of the laboratory saw that and hired me and trained me. And so I worked in that hospital lab doing all the lab work for the patients in the hospital. I even learned how to do type and cross-matching units of blood. I remember the first time I did it and how scared I was when I knew they were going to give it to them because, if I didn't type it right, it would have been disastrous. I learned how to make cultures for bacterial cultures to grow those to see, what bacteria is. I was able to observe a couple of autopsies, and it was just a great experience.
Wow. I mean, that's really incredible. I mean, watching the autopsies would have been really I don't know, that would have really been incredible.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I was surprised I didn't get squeamish, but it was fascinating. The human body is fascinating, and God and his creation. If you ever take an anatomy and physiology class, you'll even realize how more fascinating the human body is, and what it does is just a miracle.
So where in the midst of all that did you meet Brian again?
Oh, well, that's a story in itself. We were in the same grade.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned that. We were both in the same grade. So I mentioned I moved there the middle of 8th grade. By the end of 8th grade, he asked me to go study with him. And he gave me his bracelet. It was the last day of school. And he walked me to the bus. And before I got on the bus, he gave me a kiss, my first kiss. And, of course, then my bus driver, who knew me, honked the horn, made me feel real embarrassed. And so I got on the bus and went home. I lived 12 miles outside of town for where our resort was, and Brian lived in town. Granted, we were 8th grade. So, and we didn't have phones. So it's like the whole summer went by. His parents came out a couple of times to go eat at our restaurant. And I remember we had a little balcony that looked down over the restaurant. And I remember going up there and seeing him there with his parents and stuff. But there were no phone calls or nothing. And so
probably would have been a long distance phone call anyway.
Yeah,
right?
it might have been. Well, when we first moved to Stockton, we even had what is that called? Where everybody
a party line?
Party line, yes.
Oh,
and you
my.
didn't have to dial the first 3 digits. You just had to dial the last 4 digits of the phone number. But anyway, so the first day of 9th grade, I gave him his bracelet back. And then, of course, then you fast forward to our sophomore year where we had that little thing, that little not incident, but, gathering together, Let's
not call it an incident. Somebody will get in trouble legally or something.
A little, where we got together for a little bit. And then we both graduated. I went on to Kansas City, And about almost 4 years after I graduated and been in Kansas City, I went to a couple hospitals. And I worked in El Dorado's hospital and then Lamar Hospital. And then I was living at home that time when I was at Lamar. And I knew I was going to be moving back to Stockton. So I kind of wanted to get back involved, if I could, with some socially with some people. Mm-hmm. And I was at a New Year's party with some of my classmates. And I asked them, what do you think is a good way to let people know I'm back and this and that? And one of them mentioned that we will be soon, within a year, we'll be having our 5-year class reunion. And being a part of that would be one way to do that. And I said, well, who would be in charge of it? And they said, well, the class president is usually the one who puts together the 5-year class reunion. Well, Brian was the class president. So I called him and said, hey, I would like to be on the committee if you do decide to do something. And I found out later, he's thinking on his head, well, this is a whole year away. Why are you calling me? But anyway, but he also said, asked me you've got what you've been doing, where you are, and that. And then he asked me, would you like to meet on the square? Stockton community has their main area is their downtown, I guess, was a square. Mm-hmm. It was literally a square with a 4-way stop. And so you had parking spaces that squared off. So he asked me if I would meet him on the square, I think the next night or so. And I said, sure. So I'm an early bird. So I got there early and parked my car. Brian is a late person. He's still a late person, but so sorry, Brian, but it's the truth. But he pulls up and he pulls in and he does something that has never happened in my before life. He did a double take. He looked at me and then looked again. And that's, my heart just went, oh. And so, then there's not much to do in Stockton, and it's a very small town, so you park a lot, but not park where you think you're parked. You go sit at the dam and you park. Yeah, so.
You can make a whole lot of jokes with all that sentence right there.
Yes. We weren't submarine parking. We were just parking. But to me was our ability to communicate. We just talked. And so that was I want to say it was January 17th, we officially started dating. In 1980, March 6th, he asked me to marry him. July 26th, we got married 45 years ago.
Wow. Were you guys married before the 5th-year reunion?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah. I hadn't put that together.
I guess you helped plan it too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I did help plan it. Yeah. So that's our story.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Really fast. And so then what's life been like in those 45 years?
Well, unfortunately for Brian, the first 15 years was me unlearning a lot of self-degrading things about myself. I mentioned there was a lot of childhood things that happened. One of them was sexual abuse, and which led to my feeling of unworthiness and all those there were many other incidents. And so it was really, I struggled with self-worth. I struggled with being good enough. And I just had this conversation with Brian. J.D. Walt, who I follow, I don't know, with the Wake Up Call, he has a way of describing God's purposes as God has a plan A, and that is to be, us to be in the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus is kind of the director of that plan, and then we're his agents. And I knew about God by going to Catholic school and such, and I knew God says he loves us unconditionally, but I never experienced unconditional love. I wasn't sure what that was. My experience was all love was conditional. It felt that way with my parents. If I didn't clean right, or if I didn't do this right, then I was not loved. even in school, if I did my grades well, I was liked. I mean, to me, it was a lot of, if you did things right, people will like you. And that was kind of a learned experience for me. My parents were very volatile as well. Though they were loving, they were also verbal abusers. They would yell at a drop of a hat. And one of my mother's favorite phrases for me was, she would like to call me a lazy, no good SOB. And so anyway, it was hard for me in the marriage then to not bring that garbage, that baggage, shouldn't say garbage, that baggage into it. And, but I believe with all my heart and soul that God put Brian in my path as that agent, because he knew no matter what God said, it would be hard for me to believe him. But to see one of his agents show unconditional love, because during that dating time, I was able to, I told you we talked so well. Brian, I shared with Brian everything, the sexual abuse, all the things that had happened, and the girls saying this, and how much struggle, and it didn't stop him from saying, I love you. It didn't stop him from saying, I see somebody beautiful inside and out. And it was overwhelming for me at first, and then that was another struggle, was then, okay, can I live up to those expectations? All of them on my side, none of them on Brian's side. But day in and day out, he had nothing but showed what unconditional love was. What one of the first gifts he gave me was a Bible. And he lived out God's grace. He lives out God's love. He lives out his faith just beautifully. And I wish I could say in 2 or 3 years that was all resolved, but I would sit in Sunday school classes and think, if they only knew what I'd done or what has been done to me, would they really still like me? So it took many, many years to undo all that. But it was through the grace of God, through the daily love of Brian. And I do also believe going to church and going to Sunday school and starting to be in the Word and being a part of that, and all added to it. But it was one incident in about our 15th year of marriage. He got me into choir. And so we were singing, and we were preparing a song based on Psalm 139. And at practice, at the end of the rehearsal, somebody mentioned, I had never read Psalm 139, but mentioned that part where, for God created in my mother's womb,
fearfully and wonderfully made.
Fearfully and wonderfully made, yes. And so that's planted a seed in me. And of course, the song was beautiful, but don't ask me to sing it. And anyway, the next Sunday, I decided I wanted to sing in both services. So I hurriedly got up so I could leave early, because we lived about 15, 20 minutes away. And I took David with me, our oldest son. The rest stayed with Brian. But I unfortunately got there too late, so I could not sit with the choir, and I had to sit in the pew. And as I was sitting in the pew, wrestling and getting ready and kind of frustrated myself, I looked in the bulletin, and the title of the sermon was Lazy, No Good for Nothing. And his sermon just touched on Psalm 139 and the beauty of God's love and forgiveness. And I just felt this overwhelming warmth just flowing out of me, flowing into me, and all of the despair, all of the sadness, all of the pain, all just flow out. And for the first time, I felt whole and healed. And tears were flowing down. My poor son was wondering what the heck's wrong with mommy. And I can't tell him, but I read later a beautiful saying where we are all a tapestry, and that our lives is a stitch at a time, creating this beautiful picture and this beautiful tapestry. And when we're healed by God, he does the last stitch. And that was, for me, that last stitch
Hmm.
of fullness of God was stitched for me. And it just changed from that on. I knew I was worthy. I knew that God created me for a purpose. And did he like the things that happened to me? No. Did he purpose those? No, but he has a will in them. It was not his will that they happen, but he has a will in there, and that he can use me in many, many ways. It's one of the reasons why when you started the Jaws for Life and I was reading for it, that was God saying, this is what you were made for, to do that. Because all those experiences are going to help you be a good leader for that. So,
let's talk about your kids next.
Okay.
You got 3 kids.
3 of them, yes.
Yeah. How did all that experience, being a kid, your relationships to your mom and your dad and all that, how did that inform how you became a mother and how you mothered and still are a mother and grandmother?
I think the biggest thing is I never wanted my children to think they were unworthy, that no matter what they did, no matter how bad things were, I would always love them, that I accept them for who they are, and that there was nothing that they could do that would make me not love them, and that was not conditional. So that was probably the biggest thing, is that I wanted them to know that they were loved. But I also knew they needed parameters too. So they were disciplined. I wasn't just all lovey-dovey, but that was the biggest thing, was I wanted them to know that they were loved, and that I wanted them to discover that they were fearfully and wonderfully made as well, that they have gifts and talents that are beautiful. And and not to compare. I think, I went through a phase where I did comparative faith, where I did not want them to have to worry about that. Because to me that was I had no mean. Is that the word I want to say? No mean. So I had to look at others to do.
Oh yeah, no baseline.
Baseline there, yes.
And so you were always looking at somebody else, comparing your faith to their faith?
Yes. And I wanted their baseline to be based on God's that created them to be who they were to be. Does that make any sense?
How do you think you've done?
Well, they're all 3 married. They all 3 are wonderful people. They have great spouses. I wish I could say all of them go to church, but that's not important, really. They're well adjusted. Well, I say that because I went through a phase where I thought if they didn't go to church, they weren't worth following God. But God, through some hard lessons, helped me change that direction. But back to your question, they're well adjusted. They get along well. They do well. Our daughter April, works for Global Partnership for Education, and she helps countries like Arabic countries, different countries, Africa, and all that find in their marginal areas educational needs and helps fund them. So she, and David teach. They're just really good. I just love being around them, and especially as adults, to see them interact together and how well they get along. And I don't know if that answered your question. I felt like I hem-hawed around on that a little bit, because I wasn't sure really how to answer that.
Do you like your grandkids?
I thought you asked smart questions here.
There we go.
What is not to like about grandchildren? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't have any yet. So.
Oh gosh. And it'll be that way. People told me, your grandchildren, you'll just love your grandchildren. Yeah, okay. Until you have them, then you really know what they're talking about. But it is phenomenal. And 2 of our grandchildren live in Belgium. Our oldest daughter and her husband moved over there 9 years ago. So they were born over there. They live over there. probably not going to be moving back anytime soon. So building a relationship with them has been a little more challenging, but I'm very blessed that I can go over there. But this year, they spent their summer here with us. They came over, their last day of school was July 4th. So they skipped their last day of school and got here July 4th. And they stayed till August 19th.
Wow, what a gift.
Yes, it really, really was. And then our oldest son has 3. He has 2 boys and a girl, and they live here in Springfield. So I get to see them a little bit more and just love them. And they call me G-Ma, thanks to Jim Mason.
Oh, that's... Yeah. I didn't know he was handing out nicknames.
Well, he didn't. When Flannery was born, our firstborn, I was going through a stage, what do I have my kids call me? I didn't want to be grandma or grandmother. That was my mom, and I didn't have a good brother. Anyway, I didn't want to be grandmother. And so what do I want? Do I go with a French genre name because my grandkids, they were going to be speaking French, and even though they live in Belgium, they're on the French-speaking side of Belgium. But I thought, well, is that fair to the future American? So I went back and forth. And anyway, long story short, I was looking at Jim Mason's Facebook page, and he was honoring his G-Ma who had just passed away. And I saw that, and I thought, I like that. So I stole that from him, G-Ma. That's how I became G-Ma.
All right.
So thank you, Jim.
There we go. Couple more questions, then we'll wrap up. One question. As you look back over the course of your life, what are some things you're really proud about?
I'm proud of the fact that I am a child of God. I'm proud that, I feel funny saying that as proud. I am blessed to be a child of God, and blessed that he loved me enough to send a person in my life that would help me to see that. Otherwise, I don't know that I would have. So changing, becoming that, letting that go and becoming and not living in the past is, and I never have any in counseling. I sometimes wonder, why am I not crazy? But, which would be a good title for a book, by the way. So there's some sense of, I don't want to use the word pride, but blessing that it didn't, because you see so many people whose past haunt them and made them go to led them to a path that was very destructive. And I was very fortunate that didn't happen to me. I feel very, very fortunate about that. Jobs for Life, getting that started was a very much of a highlight in my life, and what it's done and seeing where it's gone.
I know that you've been committing yourself to memorize scripture. And so have you got a favorite verse or passage?
Oh, I have my life passage, my lifetime passage. I have my this year's passage. Let's see. I guess the very first scripture that ever spoke to me was Psalm 27. It just seemed to just speak right into all my life, especially the part where it says, though my mother and father forsake me, you do not forsake me. Don't turn your face away from me. Even, my enemies and foe attack me, they will stumble and fall. There was just so much about that just spoke to my life. That, in fact, is one I believe I want to have it read at my funeral. But when I was memorizing Mark, I think there was two parts of that stopped me. One was Jesus knew immediately in his spirit what they were thinking in their heart. And I thought it was interesting. Why did Jesus know in his spirit and not in his heart? Because we're told it begins with our heart. So why did not Jesus know in his heart? So that kind of was left me on a journey of that. And the other one was when they came to the crowd, and the disciples came to Jesus and said, we should send the people away. It's already in the middle of the day, late at night, and they should go find some bread. And Jesus says the simple words, you feed them. That stopped me in the tracks, because there's so much meaning and so much depth to those words, you feed them. To me, it goes to, you will be my witness. And then it goes back to be fruitful and multiply. I don't think being fruitful and multiply just necessarily means procreate. To me, it means feed me, feed others, be fruitful and multiply in that, feed my word, share my word, be my feet. So that stopped me in my tracks, and thinking those through and marinating on that for a little bit. But my life verse comes from Deuteronomy 12, which, that one starts out with, hear now, O Israel, but what does Yahweh your God ask of you? But to fear Yahweh your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, and to serve Yahweh your God with all your heart and your soul, and to obey Yahweh's commands and decrees that I'm giving you today. And to Yahweh your God belongs the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet he set his affections on your forefathers and loved them, and he chose you. He chose you, and there's something about generations. This generation's above all the other nations as it is today. And then it goes on, but that's just something about being not stiff-necked anymore. Do not be stiff-necked anymore. So it speaks directly and take it. But yeah.
You could almost get me crying, and then you throw in the stiff-neckedness, and then I gotta. You just turn it.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
See, I hide behind humor. You know that. I hide behind humor.
A little bit, but I really appreciate how you've shared more of yourself with us today. And you've spoken about Jobs for Life, and if listeners don't know what that is, they can always Google it, because Google's got lots of answers for that kind of thing, right? There's one question that I like to close with, and what's a piece of advice that you find yourself sharing with others, or a bit of wisdom that you share with others that you could close us out with today?
Be in the Word. For me, the more I'm in the Word, the more I'm equipped, because it is alive and active in your life, and it equip you to do good things. Don't hide your light. Let other people see your good deeds so they can worship our Father in heaven.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
You're a really cool person.
Oh, thank you. You are a really cool person too, Jason.
Well, a big thank you to Kim for sharing her story. And if there's anything in her story that provokes you and makes you think maybe you need to talk to somebody, I would encourage you to take a moment and talk with somebody who's trusted in your life, somebody who can pray with you and for you, and somebody who has a great listening ear. A big thanks to Kim for being open with us and for being transparent. Well, in listening to Kim, I hope that you were inspired, encouraged, and challenged, and that you begin to behold the really cool people who are around you each and every day. The Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Mo. And Taylor Likes is our executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. You can help us out by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. Until next time, stay cool.